In this video, we're taking a look at the crazy life of Michael Jackson. Stay tuned to discover the truth about his earnings, his famous friends, and the shocking claims that he actually predicted the global coronavirus pandemic years before it happened. If you enjoy this video, remember to hit the subscribe button to support our channel and stay up to date with all of our latest celebrity videos. Now, let's dive in. The numbers tell their own story. He's sold over 350 million records worldwide. He holds 39 Guinness World Records, including the highest paid entertainer of all time, and boasts 13 Grammy Awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award. And those are just the tip of the iceberg. Some call him the greatest performer to have ever lived, the king of pop. Others claim he was a predator and he should have been imprisoned. It's no exaggeration to say that Michael Jackson divides opinion for many. But one thing we can all agree on is he has one of the most recognisable faces and voices, not to mention dance moves, to have ever graced planet Earth. So exactly how did a young boy from Indiana rise to global fame? Family life. Growing up was tough for Michael. His mother, Catherine, was a Jehovah's Witness and his father, Joe, was an ex-guitarist and crane operator. The couple had 9 children, including Michael, 3 girls and 6 boys. Sadly, a 7th boy died shortly after birth. His father, Joe, was said to be one of Hollywood's toughest fathers, and he encouraged the 5 boys to play in a band and moulded them into a musical group that later became known as the Jackson 5. He was incredibly strict, wanting the boys to focus on success, and he pushed them to rehearse and polish their routines for hours and hours each day. If they made a mistake or they disobeyed him in any way, they could expect to be whipped. And that was all that Michael Jackson knew, starting from the tender age of just 5. Such a rigorous rehearsal schedule left no time for a normal childhood, like playing with friends or going to the park, and that longing to regain his lost childhood is a theme that plagued Michael for all of his life, and we'll come back to that shortly. Instead of playing, Michael and his brothers spent all of their time performing at local gigs until they'd built up a very strong following. They found success as a group, opening up for R&B stars like James Brown and Gladys Knight before they caught the attention of Motown Records, and they moved to LA, where they produced hits like I Want You Back and ABC. Although the group was successful, as the frontman and lead vocalist, Michael was the undoubted star, and in 1971, at the age of just 13, he took the plunge and began his solo career. Fame. It wasn't until 1979 that Michael really rose to stardom with his 5th studio album, Off the Wall, that saw Don't Stop Till You Get Enough hit #1 on the Billboard charts. If you didn't know who Michael Jackson was when his Thriller album came out in 1982, something was up. The album produced hit after hit, including The Girl Is Mine, Billie Jean, Beat It, Wanna Be Starting Something, and of course Thriller, and was the single best-selling album of all time. The Recording Industry Association of America certified it platinum 29 times. Teenagers around the world had posters of MJ plastered on their walls. He taught the world how to moonwalk and thrust their crotch while listening to Billie Jean. And in addition to his vocal talents, Michael's dance moves were also groundbreaking, and in order to show these off, he invested heavily in creating music videos to accompany his songs, something that wasn't really the norm at the time. He worked on his music videos with talented movie directors like Martin Scorsese, today probably best known for films like Goodfellas, The Wolf of Wall Street and Taxi Driver. And Michael wasn't afraid to push the envelope and experiment with technology, and even guest appearances by some of the most famous celebrities of the time, like Naomi Campbell, Michael Jordan, Chris Tucker, Whoopi Goldberg, John Travolta, Eddie Murphy, Paul McCartney, Olivia Newton-John, to literally name just a few. All of Hollywood seemed to be falling over themselves to be associated with the king of pop, and it was no surprise why. Particularly in Beat It, Billie Jean and Thriller, the videos broke racial barriers and transformed music videos into an art form and a promotional tool. The video for the song Scream that Michael and his sister Janet released together was the most expensive video ever made at a cost of $7 million. That's enough to make anyone scream. There was no expense too great for Michael, and it showed in the quality of his productions, but it also showed in his overspending and his overborrowing. Earnings. For a superstar of his prestige, you'd expect his earnings to be high, and you'd be right. It was said that Michael earned between $50 to $100 million per year through his touring, record sales, endorsements and merchandise, and he had a net worth of $500 million at the time of his death. Now, while he may have had a net worth of $500 million, that's not the same as having $500 million in the bank. In fact, when he died, he was actually millions of dollars in debt. Michael wasn't particularly careful with his money, and he liked to spend it on lots of extravagant things like artwork and antiques, customised cars, gold bath taps, and even a replica of his own face pulling different facial expressions. But his spending wasn't all on himself. Michael was also awarded the most philanthropic pop star in history by the Guinness Book of Records in honour of his humanitarian work. President Ronald Reagan gave him the Presidential Humanitarian Award for his support of charities. Even today, his estate continues to donate generously to good causes, and in March 2020, for example, they gave $300,000 to 3 charities helping those affected by the coronavirus pandemic. And speaking of the coronavirus, his former bodyguard claimed that the reason Michael famously wore a face mask was that he was terrified of the potential for a germ like COVID-19 spreading around the world. His bodyguard claims that Jackson predicted such a virus would one day unfold across the world. Quote, "He was very aware and would always predict that we could be wiped out at any time, that a germ could spread. If he was alive today," his bodyguard claims, "I know exactly what he would say to people now. I told you so." Recreating his childhood. The average person is lucky if they're able to buy a nice house in the country. Michael Jackson bought a 3,000-acre ranch in California that set him back over $19 million. The ranch was called Neverland, after the land where fictional character Peter Pan lived, and Michael set about trying to recreate the childhood he never had by building his own theme park in his backyard. Some backyards might have a slide or a swing. He had a roller coaster, a pirate ship, bumper cars, a super slide, a Ferris wheel, and a fully loaded arcade. He also had not one but 2 steam trains circling the perimeter of his property, not to mention a 24-hour crew to help manage everything. It's estimated that at one point all of this cost him $10 million a year just to maintain. And not only that, as part of the theme park, there was also a zoo which housed tigers, giraffes, orangutans, llamas, snakes, and a chimpanzee called Bubbles. Bubbles was saved by Michael from a Texas research facility, and such was Michael's love for Bubbles that he accompanied him to red carpet events and also ate dinner from the same table every night. Unfortunately, he had to give him away when Bubbles started to turn aggressive. Now, I mentioned that Michael was keen to recreate his childhood, and while I'm not going to discuss court cases and accusations of wrongdoing in this video, one thing that everyone can agree on is he had close relationships with lots of children. Now, of course, that's a deeply contentious issue, and I don't want to get drawn into that, but just a few of the famous children that visited Neverland included Corey Feldman, Nicole Richie, Rashida Jones, Kim Kardashian, and Home Alone star Macaulay Culkin, who also happens to be the godfather to all 3 of Michael's children. If you haven't seen our video about Macaulay Culkin, I'll include it in the description below. Friends, marriage, and children. People understandably questioned why young children often slept over at Michael's home. They were also suspicious of the unexpected marriage to Elvis Presley's daughter, his good friend Lisa Marie Presley. Cynics claimed that it was a sham to improve his public image due to the fact that charges were being made against him at the time. Nonetheless, the couple insisted that they were legitimate and they remained married for a year and a half before filing divorce. His second marriage was to a lady called Debbie Rowe, a nurse. When they got married, at their wedding, Michael's best man was an 8-year-old boy, and according to Debbie, the marriage was sealed with a kiss on the cheek, after which Michael went to bed on his own in another room. Although the couple had 2 children together, a son, Michael Jr., also known as Prince, and a daughter, Paris, Debbie is apparently quoted as saying, "Of course, it was artificial insemination. Paris was conceived in Paris. That's how she got her name. Michael wanted to call her Princess, but I thought that was stupid." Sadly, that marriage also ended after Debbie was unable to cope with the pressures of fame. She said, "Michael and I have always got on. I only divorced him because I wanted my life back. I couldn't cope with the constant pressure of fame. He's the genius, the famous one, not me." Michael received full custody of both children. He went on to have a third child, Prince, but known by his nickname Blanket. The mother was an unnamed surrogate, and Michael received international press coverage when he was filmed dangling Blanket over a balcony railing in Berlin. Appearance. Over the years, Michael's physical appearance changed drastically, and it was impossible not to notice. I mean, each time you saw him, he looked less like himself and more white. He was accused of using bleaching treatment on his skin to lighten the tone, yet the truth was that he suffered from vitiligo, a condition where pigment-producing cells die or stop functioning, which basically means your skin loses colour over time. The disease is rumoured to be responsible for a number of his quirks, like wearing a single white glove, which many thought was a fashion statement, but in fact was a way for MJ to hide his skin. On top of that, his physical appearance was also impacted by lots of plastic surgery, most noticeably to make his nose thinner and to change the shape of his face. Looking at how much his appearance changed, it's easy to understand why this caused such a stir with the tabloids. Addiction problems. In 1984, Michael and the Jackson 5 partnered with Pepsi as the face of the brand for a series of TV commercials called New Generation. During filming, there was a freak accident that left Michael severely hurt, and he had to be treated for third-degree burns to his scalp and to the back of his head after his hair accidentally caught fire. It was this incident that started Michael taking painkillers, and sadly, his addiction problems plagued him for the remainder of his life. In 1993, he cut short his Dangerous tour to enter rehab, and while there was never any proof that he took illegal drugs, ultimately his death was caused in 2009 by an overdose of Propofol, which is a prescription medication administered to help users get to sleep. Michael was sadly 50 years old when he passed away, and he'd been preparing for a comeback tour. His public memorial, held at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, was attended by 20,000 people, but 1.6 million people registered for the chance to attend the ceremony. Millions also watched on from around the world, as tributes were read from the likes of Nelson Mandela, Diana Ross and Stevie Wonder. Whether you like him or not, what no one can deny is Michael Jackson revolutionized the music industry. He broke records and he won more awards than any other artist in the history of pop music. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other videos that are on screen now and help support our channel by hitting that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, catch you on the next video.